In this video, we look at multiculturalism and diversity in society. This is part of the curriculum for a Red Pill University. Rubik's Cube is a good illustration of cultural cohesion and chaos. People who believe in multiculturalism think that this pluralism brings people together to live and work together without sacrificing their particular identities. An interesting salad bowl rather than a melting pot. In practice, this peace and harmony can be very hard to achieve. It all depends on how close the various groups living together are to each other culturally. British and Dutch are easy. Arab Christians and Arab Muslims are a problem. It's not about race or ethnicity, it's about culture. Way back around 200 BC, a Jewish sage wrote, "Every living thing loves its own sort, and every man his fellow. Every creature mixes with its own kind, and human beings stick to their own sort." Australia's 70 years of White Australia policy created a fairly homogeneous and optimistic nation in values and institutions. There have been some more or less successful multi-ethnic national conglomerates. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, up till about 1918, included speakers of 10 languages, but they all went independent days after the war. The Russian Federation has more languages, ethnic groups and religions, but policy is very clear that they must all give supreme loyalty to the one nation. The United States was a melting pot, not a salad bowl, but this has changed markedly with identity politics, which has divided the nation into mutually hostile groups. Canada was created as a forced amalgamation of British and French areas, and conflict and separatism have never been far away. Australia's White Australia policy was dismantled by the Holt government, and Whitlam made multiculturalism official policy in 1972. The White Australia policy didn't die without a fight from Arthur Calwell, the leader of the Australian Labor Party. He was concerned about immigration of people who would not be culturally compatible. After the policy was overturned, the Whitlam government made multiculturalism official policy, and in 1975 made racial discrimination illegal. In 1995, the Keating government inserted the notorious Section 18C, which outlaws anything that offends or insults. This has been a very controversial attack on free speech. The immigration of Vietnamese, Chinese, Indians and others has certainly given Australia a treat in festivals and food, and introduced us to interesting aspects of other cultures. But some cultures have imported real problems for national cohesion. Child brides, female genital mutilation, honour killings, violent religious intolerance and violence as a way of life have not benefited the nation. In Western Europe, the scale of mass immigration from the Muslim world has introduced rape culture and violent attacks on Christianity. How can Western nations tolerate immigrants burning the flags of the host nations? France, with 65 million people, does not allow questions about religion in the census, but surveys suggest France's Muslims are now around 10% of the population, and those of Muslim background higher. And the higher Muslim birth rate is pushing the rate up further. Muslim belief or background correlates with higher criminality. About 60% of the French prison population are Muslim. Germany also has over 5 million Muslims in its 84 million population. France and Germany have many no-go zones, and Sweden, with 10 million people, now has over 60. A university study in Sweden has graphed the cultural difference of immigrant groups from native Swedes. Community violence has overwhelmingly come from several groups far from the Swedish norm, overwhelmingly from Muslims and Africans. The Swedish Social Democrat government has aggressively sought immigration from the Third World, and 20% of the population now were born in another country. The government has gone so far as to say there is no native Swedish culture. This is a cultural and ethnic death wish. In Australia, we have misguided people who don't see the danger in this approach. Ayaan Hirsi Ali fled Somalia to the Netherlands to escape an unwanted arranged marriage. She was elected to the Dutch Parliament as an outspoken campaigner against tolerating repressive Islamic culture. She says, all human beings are equal, but all cultures and religions are not. She opposes the Islamic vision of a caliphate, a society ruled by Sharia law, in which women who have sex before marriage are stoned to death, homosexuals are beaten, and people who leave Islam are killed. She points out that violence is inherent in Islamic doctrines and practice. The Syrian civil war brought to Europe millions of Muslims claiming to be Syrian refugees when they were not Syrian or genuine refugees. Africans, overwhelmingly Muslim, have flooded into Europe seeking better economic opportunities, and useful idiots have helped their entry. The multiculturalism of globalists and indiscriminate refugee advocates is facilitated invasion. In August 2015, Germany's Angela Merkel opened the floodgates to a tsunami of culturally unassimilable Muslims from West Asia, Pakistan and North Africa. The violence imported with these has caused great social disruption and resentment. Hungary, Poland, Czechia and Slovakia have taken a harder line to protect their cultural identity. Hungary remembers 160 years of Turkish Muslim occupation. Mass immigration from the Muslim world has imported virulent anti-Semitism along with disdain for Western culture. Australia has not been immune to disgraceful attacks by Muslims on Jews, both verbal and physical. In January 2022, a Muslim from Blackburn in England's West Midlands took hostages of a Jewish congregation near Dallas in Texas. Blackburn has become a no-go zone which has produced many jihadis, is steeped in anti-Semitism and effectively outlaws flying the British flag. Despite all the evidence about danger from Islam, Australia has naive advocates for all people claiming refugee status. Some refugees are not genuine but a real danger to national security and public safety. All our major city centres are now dotted with concrete bollards to prevent terrorist car attacks. Brisbane's King George Square and the Queen Street Mall have them. Likewise in Melbourne, Southern Cross Station and Federation Square. Our political system can only work with a reasonable degree of cultural homogeneity. I took this photograph of a demonstration next to Brisbane City Hall by jihadis supporting the Islamic State. It's a fair question to ask, who let these people into Australia? Cultural Marxism's child, gender and identity politics, has brought with it the cult of diversity, the belief that cultural, ethnic, gender and sexual diversity are an unalloyed good thing and must be imposed on all our institutions, company boards, staff selection, party candidates, and so on. Craig Laundy was Malcolm Turnbull's Assistant Minister for Multiculturalism. On March 1, 2016, he wrote in The Australian, "We have one of the most cohesive and harmonious populations in the world. This will be on show this month in Harmony Day, when communities across the country hold parties and festivals that celebrate our multicultural success story. I can walk down Auburn Road in my electorate in Western Sydney and enjoy a meal from just about anywhere in the world without leaving the street, and on Australia Day go on to enjoy a vast array of international festivals." This is a very superficial attitude, and it doesn't recognise that culture is like an iceberg. A large part of it is below the surface. Food, dress, music, visual arts, drama, crafts, dance, literature, language, festivals and games are all easily visible aspects of culture. But uncritical multiculti enthusiasts usually don't see differences in concept of self, concept of community and friendship, treatment of elders and extended family, definition of obscenity, body language, personal space, touching, tone of voice, treatment of animals, concept of past and future, attitude toward punctuality, toleration of others' beliefs, attitude towards women and homosexuality, and especially the use of violence in settling differences. These areas can give rise to misunderstandings, anger, and violence. In an article reproduced in the Weekend Australian on 22 January 2022, Jordan Peterson says that diversity, inclusion, and equity ideology is killing universities, meritorious selection, and the general culture. Diversity is an ideological and political weapon used by progressives that is divorced from reality. Would you want the pilot of your plane or your brain surgeon selected on merit or on gender equity, race equity, or disability equity? So why the manic desire for quotas over personal competence? To sum up, multi-ethnicity is not the problem. The ideology of multiculturalism is, and diversity for its own sake is not a good thing.